Okay, Leanne Hughes, a very, very warm welcome to 10Q Interview. Thank you for joining me today. I guess let's kick off for anyone who's not familiar with who you are, what you do with your 15-second elevator pitch.
Well, depends on what day it is. But what I will say is that when it comes to workshops and business in general, I help you design fast, deliver strong without stress.
Okay, sounds sounds like you've practiced that. Hold on, let's
Well,
get
it's subtitle of my book, and I keep taking it as the opening to my podcast now. It is kind of catchy, and I think it applies to a lot of not just workshops, but a lot of things in general. Yeah, which we can talk about.
Okay, so you mentioned your podcast then. So let's talk about that briefly. Why a podcast? How did it get started?
Well, I don't know. Do you listen to Pat Flynn at all? Pat Flynn's Not
Um,
Passive Income podcast.
do you know what I used to? I used to consume a lot of Pat Flynn's content. And I'm probably going back, I don't know, I feel like 10 years ago, if not longer.
Yeah. Yeah, he was around then. I only listened to his podcast, I think it was in 2017. And it was the only
Right.
podcast I listened to for 12 months. And he was going on about podcasting and all this sort of stuff. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I get it. It was actually kind of funny story, my podcast intro. So I was more of a podcast consumer. I loved Pat Flynn, then I listened to Jordan Harbinger. And
Okay.
coincidentally, there was a podcasting conference in Brisbane where I'm from. I was working
Yeah.
internally for a big mining company, and Jordan was speaking at this conference. So
Okay.
I bought a ticket. I took a couple of days off work, and they had this competition over the 2 days. And it was, if you submit your podcast name and we draw it out of the hat, you win this book. And I'm like, I want to win the book. I don't have a podcast, so I just thought I'm just going to write a title down, and if it gets picked, I'll start the show. Anyway, of course, the story is they pull my, it was like on a blue post-it note, and they pull it out and they're like, first time facilitator with Leanne Hughes, come up and let us know what your podcast is about and who it's for. So in the
Oh
30
no.
seconds running up to the stage, I just made it up. And then 3 months later, I started the show. So that's the story. Can I tell you one thing about that? This is really cool. So I won the
Yeah, go,
book.
sure.
Then I won this photo competition from the event. Anyway, fast forward 12 months later, Pat Flynn is the keynote speaker at this podcasting event, and I'm the MC. And I got to hang out
In
with Pat
Australia?
Flynn. Yeah, I got to hang out with Pat Flynn, Jordan Harbinger down the Gold Coast for 3 nights. So it was pretty awesome.
That is very, very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Pat Flynn, he's kind of like an OG. I mean, when I say I was following for 10 years, I think I was following it long before his podcast. Like, because I think he wrote the book, didn't he? Smart Passive Income. And that was when I think affiliate marketing really sort of kicked off.
Yeah, I think you're
And
right.
actually, I think that's how I probably came to know him because I was like, oh, I want to sort of get into this affiliate marketing business. But he's been
Yeah.
doing what he's been doing a long, long time.
You're right. I think it started with blogging. He had an online course even before that based on
Yeah.
architecture. And I think he's doing a lot of Pokemon stuff these days. I sort of dip in and out of what he does. Um, but love his approach actually to marketing and just building audiences.
Yeah. Agreed. So you, I mean, before you had that, excuse me, before you had that 30 seconds where you were clambering up on stage to think about what you were going to say, had you thought prior to that, I am going to have a podcast at
No,
some point?
no, not at all. No. But like, I'd been in this atmosphere where for 2 days, everyone else around me had podcasts and they were just normal people, right? Because I
Yeah.
thought, oh, you had to be particular. You know how you have in your mind, like, oh, an author is special, podcasters are special, YouTubers. You have this idea in your mind. I was working full time, right?
Right.
But what I was interested in was at work, I was being sent around the world to deliver workshops, and
Okay.
I was trying to find podcasts like content about that and how to get better at it, and I couldn't find anything. There were podcasts about like public speaking, and I thought, oh, this maybe I can scratch my own itch, and also if I interview people, find out what they do, maybe someone else will find it useful. So I think the
Right.
podcast itself was, firstly, it was very selfish. I just wanted to get better at what I was doing.
Okay.
Hmm.
So what was the actual conference about?
Which conference? So the podcasting conference was about podcast. It was all about
Oh, it was a
build. It
podcasting
was all about
specific
building a
one.
podcast.
Oh,
But I was just
okay.
there because I love Jordan Harbinger so much,
Ah, I see. Okay.
Yeah, and then I got obviously drank the Kool-Aid.
And when was this?
2018.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a long time ago. That's before. I mean, everyone's got a podcast these days, and
Uh-huh.
but like back then, it was still pretty niche, right?
Big time. Yeah, and I remember
Yeah.
even telling a few friends, and it was like such a big deal. Like, oh my gosh, you're starting a podcast. Nowadays, if someone tells you, you don't really bat an eyelid, right? Because
Mm.
you're right. There's so many; it's quite oversaturated. Back then, though, and I built some. I think by the third episode, I was getting like 50 downloads an episode, and I was just over the moon with that. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, people started reaching out, and then I built a Facebook community around it. Ran some online programs off the back of an email list.
Do you feel like? Do you feel that it was a good thing to be an early adopter?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do, and I even now, like, I'm wondering because I brought back my facilitation podcast with the launch of my new book, and then I'm going to contain it, do a limited season run, and then I think, okay, what's next, and who do I want to be? And my
Yeah.
first thought was to be that person, you got to start a podcast on that topic. But I think it's different now. I don't know what the media is, but I don't think I could get cut through the same way I did back then.
No, I agree. I think it's tough to launch a podcast now. I've been a podcast fan for many years,
Mm.
and I've always wanted to start my own. And then this was my my avenue into doing so. But I was chatting to someone about this the other day. Like there's so many out there, and B, the ones that are out there are very long. And mine are long. I mean, I've had over 2 hour episodes.
Mm.
But the problem is you're then not competing with just people, you're competing with time as well because okay, so I mean I listened to a Joe Rogan one yesterday with Ice Cube, which was really, really good listen, by the way. And I think it was over two, I think it was like 2.5 hours.
Oh yeah,
And it's only because I was doing something yesterday that allowed me to have 2.5 hours time where I could listen to it. That I did. Otherwise you're then competing with people and you're competing with time. And like I said earlier, everyone's got a podcast these days, so it's
yeah.
tough. It's tough to have that real. But then I guess with you,
Mm.
you're doing something so niche that actually you don't need the hundreds of thousands of listeners because you just need the ones who are like the quality rather than the quantity.
Yeah, and that's right. And when I did pause first time facilitator, because I had like this shift of direction last year in consulting, I thought, I'll start this new show. And I called it, it was quite generic, but it was about like purpose, work and live large is what I called it.
Yeah.
And honestly, the content was actually better than the other, and the production was better than the other one. The
Yeah.
downloads weren't there. It just wasn't narrow enough to get
No.
that traction. Mm.
Do you think you need to be narrow to get? I mean, everyone says it, right? Niche down. Do you think that's?
I
Do you
hate
think that's
that, but I
true?
think so.
Yeah, I do.
You do as well?
Yeah, I hate it as well.
I
But I
hate
just
it
think
too.
that I mean, like I said, unless you are the early adopter like Joe Rogan, who can talk to anyone about anything that, or you have that massive audience already, I think it's really tough to be
Yeah.
broad.
Well, it's interesting because, like, there comes a time where you think, oh, I've found all my favorite podcasts now. This is all I need. Like, and, I've got my run of Jenny Blake, Jordan, Joe Rogan I listen to as well, Tim
Yeah,
Ferriss. And you think, how many more can I fit into a week? And these episodes come out 2 or 3 times a week from these
and
people.
they're 2+ hours, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Mm.
And then you get someone like Steve Bartlett that comes along with Diary of a CEO. And suddenly I've got time. But actually, I watch his YouTube videos versus listen. I actually love watching his
Do you?
shows.
Interesting.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it is interesting because I don't watch any other interview show, but something about the production, the lighting, I don't know, it just
He did an episode not long ago where where he talked about the production, and
oh,
I am paraphrasing a bit here, but he said that when he first wanted to do the video, he said to the person, right, go away and tell me what budget you need, what setup you need. And he said the guy came back, he's like, oh, I need these 2 cameras, and he's like, no. He goes, dream scenario, what does it look like? If I can find the episode, I'll send it to you. It's quite
yeah.
interesting. And the guy then comes back and goes, well, if money was no object, we'd have 8 cameras, we'd have this swivel thing, we'd have this tracking thing, we'd have all this lighting and blah blah blah. And then obviously he said, yeah, let's do it. And it's funny, he's a bit of a love-hate figure over here, Steve Bartlett, but there's no doubting that the podcast caliber of guests he gets is just off the
Oh,
charts these
off the
days.
charts. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. And then the interviews and the actual editing of it, like the hooks and his like
But
even his TikTok with the hooks right at the beginning and
yeah,
very
I think I read somewhere he's got a team of 40 people working on it.
yeah, and this is what I mean. So like, and then here I was with my Leanne Hughes Work and Live Large podcast, which is like kind of
Mm,
similar stories, but
yeah.
You know, so that's
It's
what that's
tough.
the general versus, yeah. At the same time, it's like, do you want to have a podcast that is so focused and narrow? Like, it comes to a point where with first time facilitator, what else can I say after 200 episodes about workshops? Like,
Yeah,
what else is
yeah.
there?
No, it's true. It's
Uh,
true. Well, it's funny enough. I was quite broad on this one. 10Q interview originally was just chatting to interesting people, and
mm,
I had these 10 questions that everyone answered, and I was struggling to get cut through because I talked to a facilitator one week, and then the next week I talked to someone in marketing, and then the next week I talked to someone in an entrepreneur, and it was like trying to train the audience, as it were, to be this is who's going to be on because I'm not a Rogan. I haven't got access to like the Ice Cubes and the Russell Brands of this world.
mm,
Like it's tough. So then I niched into content and content creators, but there's a little bit of me that is funny enough, a little bit of me that misses the sort of just the general. I love the content side of things, and I love hearing from
mm.
people, but there is a bit of me that misses it sometimes.
Yeah, I hear you on that. And I think,
Yeah,
I mean, it's like when I built up trust with the audience, then I started bringing on like different people. Like I had an auctioneer on the show, just had interesting people. And I think trying to, draw parallels with their life and running a workshop, right? And I think you can
yeah,
build up that trust, but you got to like after you've done the reps.
yeah. I
Um,
agree.
mm,
Okay,
this is
let's
depressing
talk.
because we both love podcasting now. I don't want to bloody niche again.
Well, I mean, you kind of covered it a bit then. So talk to me about how you said you had 200 odd episodes. Like, how what's your ideation process to say? I mean, that's a lot of content, especially on audio.
Yeah.
Like, how do you come up with the ideas for each episode?
Well, I mean, it's an interview. It's a bit of both. It's
Oh, is it okay?
interview plus solo from time to time. And solo,
Right.
I'd love to say that I'm the type of person that batches content. Nothing like it. Often with a solo episode, it was because I hadn't had an interview that week, and I'm like, crap, I've got to release an episode. But it's funny. But then I'd be like, so I've got a parallel group. So listeners, I'm like, I always say at the end of the show, join our community on Facebook called the Flip Chart, and we'll continue the
Right.
conversation. So there's like 2,000 people in there. So I'm just seeing what, again, it's just what Pat looks at is like what questions are being asked, and then I'll grab a question, I'll write a few bullet points, and then I'll just hit record. And it was funny because I often those were the episodes that people actually loved, and
Yeah.
the preparation was just organic. I just said what I had to say, kept it practical, and hit just release. So
It's really interesting you say that about the Facebook group.
yeah,
So is that engaged? Have you had that?
big
Talk to me about
time.
that because I
Oh
don't
my
think a lot of
gosh.
people, and I'm making a mass assumption here. I think a lot of people will record an episode and then just fling it out and then not worry about the distribution, the engagement sort of thing after.
Yeah. I'm lucky because facilitation is all about co-creation and group work.
Right.
And the headache. So I mean, you would have heard the whole like there's different types of problems you can solve with either a supplement or the painkiller. And I think
Yeah.
the first time facilitator is a painkiller. Like people that have no idea have to step up in front of a workshop and run sessions in front of groups, and like it's nerve wracking. Like all the feelings that I felt when I had to do it for the first time, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And
Yeah.
so the pain problem it solves with the flip chart is that people will post, "Hey, I'm running a leadership session in 2 weeks. I want to make it really cool. Like this is a group." And everyone just shares activities. And basically, when it kicked off, I was in there a lot of the time, just like trying to create conversation. And
Yeah.
now it runs itself. It's really low stress. The people are wonderful and generous. They're posting selfies of the book in there now. Like it's a really lovely
Is
community.
it an open group? Can anyone join?
Yeah, yeah.
And
So instead of
oh,
private, yeah, it's called the flip chart.
the flip chart. Okay, I'll link
Yeah,
to that below in case anyone wants to
yeah,
take a look. I might take a look myself. Sounds interesting.
yeah. But I've seen. I mean, I've been a member of other podcast groups that don't. That the engagement isn't there, and I think it's because
Because you're niche.
it's because of the niche. No, but I also think. I mean, the mission for the group is let's stamp out boring workshops around the world. So we have a common enemy, and I
Right.
think that helps having a common enemy like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
A lot of people talk about that in marketing, about how you grow is having that common enemy, right? That people can either rally behind or rally against. But if you don't, standing for something.
Yeah, that's it.
Hmm. Okay. Let's talk about how you make your podcast. What tools you use,
Yeah,
systems you use, processes you use. Because I think a lot of
cool.
people probably a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit scared or fearful of Oh, it looks like hard work. So
I
I'm curious how everyone
yeah.
approaches it.
I mean, my process now is different to what it was when I first started. I guess my number one tip would be buy a Mac, get a MacBook. Honestly,
Oh,
you've got
really?
yes. I've had friends that are like, "What's the MacBook equivalent of GarageBand?" I'm like, "I don't know." It's gonna. I mean, okay, Descriptor's out now, which is even better. But I mean,
Yeah.
I kicked off with GarageBand. I'd record in Zoom if it was an interview like this. I didn't use any
Yeah.
fancy software. I actually bought the Zoom 5N digital
Oh,
recorder for in
yeah.
person. I've got two ATR 2100s. They're less than $100 each.
Yeah.
So that's like the equipment. Yeah, when I first did it, I was in GarageBand. I actually love editing things, which is terrible. So it took me about 50 episodes to outsource that to someone in Argentina. I love editing, anything, it's just like
Yeah.
videos, that sort of stuff. And then, so now it's quite different. I've just engaged a production company in the Philippines, and they do everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But a tip is, so my podcast within interviews, I'll do the interview and then I'll record the introduction and post production, like after,
Audio and video, or just audio?
just audio.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, but the problem is often I might have back to back meetings, so I don't get around to doing the intro
Yeah, I
in the
do that.
moment. And if I don't do it like 15 minutes after the episode,
You
it's
forget what you talked
gone.
about, don't you? Yeah.
And then the weight of that. So that's probably my number one tip if you are using outsourcing. But hey, Descript is phenomenal. Do you use Descript?
I don't. I've heard it. Do you know what? I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but no, I don't.
I use it for
What
everything.
do you use it for?
Everything. So let's just say I better do a solo episode soon. I've been promising an episode about my book launch. So I'm going to record a solo episode on that. I'll record it in Descript or even just on GarageBand. It'll create a script. So rather than editing the sound waves,
Yeah.
I can basically one click, I'll say remove filler words, and it will remove every and R there.
Nice.
Then I shift it to speed 1.5, and I'll just go
Okay.
through, and then I'll just cut out words that I don't like or where I stuffed up. Then I put it back into speed 1, and I sound awesome. I sound like I haven't made a mistake.
Does it work that well?
Yes, it's
Okay.
like, oh my gosh. Even videos, like last year I was doing like every 2 weeks I'd be doing creating like a 2x2 framework, and it would take me about 20 minutes to explain it. Then I'd use Descript to cut it down to a sweet like 8 minutes,
Yeah.
and the editing took like 10 minutes.
That's video.
Video, it edits your video. So I don't edit the video, I edit the text, and it cuts. So
Oh
you
my
get
God, really?
jump cuts. Yeah.
Would that work in a situation like this where I've got my video and your video?
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my
So
God,
how that
really?
works. Yeah. So all I did was in iMovie, I'd combine my iPad screen where I was drawing and my video. So I'd do a split
Yeah.
screen, combine that, export it into Descript, edit it there into YouTube.
Oh my days. I might have to look at this.
It's like Zoom was my favorite tool for maybe 3 years, but Descript is number one. Like I'm such a raving evangelist. It's
Oh.
changed my life.
Oh, really? That's strong.
Yes. I'm not joking.
Okay.
Like I went when I was in California in February. I was telling everyone about it. I created a Loom video just showing them how good it was. I can send you the Loom video. Actually, I created for them.
Yeah, do so. And I'll stick. Or if you're happy to, I'll stick it in the link in the description as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
okay. Yeah, I'd love to see that. I'm always looking for ways to streamline my process. I'd love to put out more episodes, but like, I don't think people realize the time. I say people. I didn't realize the time that goes in behind. And I'm not talking about full production either. Just like
Yeah.
kind of basic. It's just timely.
Oh, it is like just setting like the scheduling, who to
Yeah.
talk to, putting it in, and then finding out more about that. Yeah, it is. And then
Yeah.
hey, the episode's out, like the whole end to end process, and then
I know.
posting it on social media. Why do we? We are talking ourselves out of podcast now. Even though I think we both I love it. Like it's my favorite. I mean, it changed everything for me. So I love podcasting.
I do love it, Leanne. I really do. I just wish I had the team like Stephen Bartlett does
I
behind me just to do it.
know.
I like this bit. I like chatting to people and I like hearing what they got to say and discussing things. It's all the other stuff I find a bit.
I hear
But
you.
he started, he started somewhere, and I guess he's kind of like he's the blueprint, right? He's the what you got to try and he started. I mean, do you know? Did you follow him from the beginning when he was in his cupboard under the stairs, literally chatting about what was in his diary.
No,
Like that's how he started.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was basically documenting what was in his diary each week and the learnings he had, like, meeting with X and blah blah blah. And I followed him. I mean, I listened to him from the very first one, and that's what he used to do. It was kind of interesting because I was on that entrepreneurial journey as well, and he was at Social Chain, and he was sort of discussing what he was doing. It was almost like building public,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's just kind of evolved into the behemoth that it is today.
Oh, that's so encouraging.
Yeah.
It's
I
an interesting. Oh, sorry.
no, go on.
Something I always question, like, is when do you continue versus when do you turn left?
I don't
Like,
know.
how did you know what I mean? Like, because there's certain, I know I can see other people, other creators, right? And they're consistent and it's awesome, but they're not getting the traction. And I just think, how do you
See,
know?
that's the $1,000,000 question,
Yeah.
right? Everyone says, you just got to keep going. And funnily enough, so here's a bit of an history lesson for you. 10Q interview started in 2012. Originally, it was like a text form interview. I'd ask people, and I gave up. Basically, I gave up after 7 or 8 interviews. And I said this on a previous episode. I wonder where I would be now had I not. So when I started this again, like last week was the year anniversary since I started it. And I was like, I'm not giving up. I'm just going to keep going. I don't care about the numbers. I know that I will get better. I'll get more guests. The whole thing. But if this was my sole like money driver, or then I don't know, it'd be tough for me. I'm in a fortunate position where I don't have to, it doesn't make any money, but then it
Yeah.
doesn't really cost me. It costs me fractions every month. So
Yes.
I don't know is the honest answer to that question.
Yeah. I don't know either.
I guess it depends why you're doing it, right?
Yeah, and you're right. And so back to the niche and like back to my reason for running the show, you asked me that. It was very self-absorbed. Like, I want to get better at facilitation. And
Right.
so I didn't actually care about who downloaded it or the numbers or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was actually just, I was winning just by having conversations.
Yeah. I have a question about when you started, and because I find that setting up a podcast is actually, even today, is quite a cumbersome process. But I can imagine in 2017, it was like horrendous.
Well, we didn't have Canva, so I used, you had alternatives. I had a MacBook, which was
Right.
like the key. Pat Flynn, going back to him, he actually had a free how to start a podcast. So I had, one screen open with that split screen. Then I was just following the instructions and taught myself. I mean, I built my first website when I was 12 years old. I learned HTML. Like, I will figure it out. So tech doesn't scare me at all.
But even then, right, it was hosting it. Like even now, hosting it, you got so many different hosts.
Yeah.
And it's different to. I mean, I can build a website, but that seems easy. To set the original setup for that seems easier than setting up a podcast. And I can and I imagine now it is at its most simplest state.
Yeah.
So 6 years ago, like submitting to Apple, submitting to Spotify,
That's right.
submitting
Yeah.
to, oh my
Yeah.
God,
You're
it
right.
must have been really a different, RSS feeds were still like the thing back.
Exactly.
I mean, they
Yeah.
are now.
Yeah.
But
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Libsyn. I've switched out from Libsyn. I host in Buzzsprout now, but yeah, that Libsyn was it. I mean, the stats were just the website was like built in it looked like 1990s. There was no drag and drop. It was like you had to click here, find the file.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I don't know. It wasn't. I just followed the instructions. It wasn't a huge deal.
Right.
But you're right. It's so much easier now. Like, and the barrier to entry is obviously very low. Back then, you're right.
Yep.
You submit to Apple, you're like, when's this going to be uploaded? And
Yeah.
is it even working?
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about goals. I want to talk about your book at some point, so I don't know if this is going to be the best time to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So when you started your podcast, we kind of talked about it a minute ago, I guess. But what are your goals with your podcast?
They're different now than what they were back then. So yeah, I mean, I explained what they were back then. I think now it's about audience growth. It's about actually having a platform that will attract. I've had some pretty amazing people. So when I mapped out the podcast originally, I
Mm.
don't know if you've done like the Dream 100 list.
Um, no, officially no, but I have a friend of mine who's a massive believer or advocate, I guess, of the Dream 100. So, what's the chap's name? The American. He always works with Tony Robbins, doesn't he? What's his name? I'll Google it. Yeah, go on
Yeah,
anyway.
Google it. Yeah, have a look. I
Brunson. That's it. Something Brunson. I think.
Russell Brunson, the
Russell
funnels guy.
Brunson. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Dream 100. I think is his concept.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know where I heard about it from, but I'm like, oh, I'll just put 50 names in, like, my favorite authors and my favorite TED talker and all that. And within before episode 15, I had like one of the, like a TED talker, Julian Mather. I was like, Julian Treasure. Julian Mather's a friend of mine. I caught up with the other week. Julian Treasure wrote my favorite TED speech. So he was on it very early on. Then one of my favorite.
I think we have to pull at that thread a little bit. So you had this list with that guy on.
Yeah.
How did you go from being on the list to being on the podcast?
Well, I think his TED talk at the time had like 21 million views. So I just sent him an email. I said, congratulations, your video's been watched 21 million times. I'm sure 20 million have been my hits because I love your speech so much. I play it all the time. And he loved it. And then he just booked in. So it was different landscape like back then, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he was being invited on shows as frequently. He was on Steve Bartlett's show like last year.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yeah. And I got him like in 2018. I've had him on twice. Yeah.
That's interesting. Did you notice a jump in subscribers or downloads with having someone like that on?
No.
Okay.
Where I had it on, we were in like the micro communities around workshops. So, and this is where you get niche. This is where the nichiness is good. Like there's a tool in America. It's called the Strengths Finder. It's like an assessment people do with their teams.
Okay.
And I had a guy on there. He's a strengths coach, and I put it into that community. So they're really passionate about this tool, and they have to run workshops about the tool. So yeah, then it just went off that. Then it was more about one of my favorite authors, Michael Bungay Stanier. He wrote the book The Coaching Habit. Again, famous in my niche. He was actually in Brisbane. He flew to Brisbane to do a speech. It was a couple of $1,000s to go to this leadership summit. I was in Singapore at the time. I flew overnight back to Brisbane the day of, and I said, I won't be able to make the conference. Plus, I didn't want to spend that much money on a ticket. I said, would you like to be on an interview? And so I got to meet him one-on-one for free. Anyway, we become mates. He's endorsed my book now. Having him on the show spiked it as well. And I got a video guy in, and we made sure it was filmed, not like Diary of a CEO, but it looked good.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Anyone else exciting?
I mean, I met my business coach through Alan Weiss. He wrote the book $1 Million Consulting, and then I ended up just working with him because his interview actually it just blew up. It was super had a lot of hits. Was very provocative. He said a few things that rattled some people, which was good.
Nice.
He rattled me. He rattled me. Yeah, but you can't tell. I watched the video, and I remember what I was thinking in that interview because he called. So HR people typically listen to my podcast because it's about learning and development. And he called HR people. He was like, they're hardly relevant. They're like they're a vestigial organ. You don't even need them. Like very, very New York, right?
When he said that, were you secretly going, yes?
I thought I physically reeled back, but the video doesn't show that. I look pretty composed, but I remember going, just trying to breathe and go, what the hell? But it was freaking awesome. And it was a wake-up call for me and for the audience. It was good.
Nothing like a bit of controversy to spark engagement, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's his brand.
Yeah. How much... I feel like this next question is more about... I don't know if it's as relevant in podcasting as it is in kind of like other content niches, but do you analyze the performance of episodes? See what's worked, what hasn't worked?
Only look for like outliers, maybe look for patterns. So, I mean, one of the other guests I didn't even mention, but he was the most downloaded show, Mark Bowden. He's like a world leading body language expert. Like the show spiked, my YouTube, the videos spiked. So, I mean, he's got a very successful YouTube channel as well. So that transferred to my platform too.
Okay.
I do. I'm looking more for qualitative responses. So like every week, right, the episode would go out. I'd post about it in the Facebook group, and I'd see what
Okay.
kind of responses episodes would get, and that would give me some like clue in terms of am I on the right track here or not.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I'm not a data person.
No.
I'm definitely more an energetic type of person. Not to say that I'm woo wooey, but I just go with what I feel. I go with guests that I think would resonate, that I like to talk to, that I can learn from.
Yeah.
What about
Okay.
you?
Fair enough.
How do you go with the numbers?
I don't care at the moment.
Mm,
I don't. I'm a bit like you. Like I just want to speak to people that I find interesting, and my theory behind that is if I find them interesting, then I think other people will.
yeah.
And ultimately, if they don't, then so what? I've had a good chat. Like for me, what's the worst case scenario, right? You and I will chat for an hour, and this, I don't know, I'm totally aware this is probably different from the guest's perspective, but from my perspective, the very worst case scenario is you and I chat for an hour. I edit it, upload it, and it gets 0 downloads. Now, A, I know that's not going to happen, but
Mm,
B, even if it does happen, I've had a chat with someone interesting for an hour and I've learnt stuff and connected. And I always used to say that, like, if you and I met at a networking event or a conference, you'd have this sort of 2 minute, oh, hi, I'm Chris. You go, oh, hi, I'm Leanne. And,
mm.
oh, I'm a facilitator. And I'll be like, oh, and then we go our separate ways. And then, you just, you might get a LinkedIn connection or
Yeah.
something. And then, but you'd never really have that deep, meaningful engagement. Whereas I feel like in this podcast environment, that's what you do get. And so, yeah, worst case scenario, nothing happens. But I just know that's not really the case. So,
Yeah, I'm with you. And I've also had conversations where I'm like, damn it, I wish I recorded that. That would have been a good podcast. Do you get that as
so yeah,
well? Where all the time, like I'll have a coffee or someone will say something and go, we should have been recording this.
I often get that with our mutual friend, actually. Like
Oh,
we'll
with
have
you.
like,
Yeah.
with Yuri, I
Yeah.
will have like, I don't know, FaceTimes or whatever. And it's just like, oh, that would be good content. I don't know though. I mean, I guess the counter to that is, would you, if it
I
was being recorded, would you be having the same? Would you say the same things
No,
again? There,
no. And it's actually quite funny. Let's talk about Yuri for a second in content. So, I mean,
she's
you must video. So, like, Yuri and I voice note and send each other videos, right?
yeah,
And so we had this. I had a Zoom call one day a couple years ago, and someone was like 5 minutes late to the call, and it was only a 30-minute call, and I'm like, I got really angry, so I voice noted Yuri like ranting about this guy that was late,
yeah,
and I don't know, maybe 6 months after that, I was like, this video was on my phone. I was like, oh, that's actually quite funny. I might upload it as a TikTok. And this TikTok, it had over like 200,000 views and people were just going nuts. Like my only viral thing on TikTok. And it wasn't even intentional. It was because I was just being myself. Like I wasn't hamming it up. I
yeah,
was like just talking to Yuri as if, and I think you're right. It's like, oh, like the power of that. Because I
yeah.
think even like we got this record button on now. So it's like, would I be talking to you the same way without? I think so, but I don't know. Maybe I am hamming it up a bit. I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I think it gets to a point where you probably. I mean, we're like what, half an hour into this conversation now. I think to ham it up for that long,
Yeah.
constantly, is probably tough. And I don't think you are. I think you
No,
probably.
I don't think I am. This is
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just not swearing or like we're not in a big rant right now. And I rarely do go on rants, but like I kind of joke in my book. It's so weird. Like punctuality is like one of my core. It's so boring, but I just love punctuality. So yeah, I went to town that day.
It's just I. Do you know what's funny? Like I was chatting to my wife about this literally at the weekend. I love my girls dearly. I've got 2 young daughters, but I hate the impact they've had because I'm like you. I think you've got to be on time, or you got a very good reason or whatever. It's just common decency. But when you have kids, oh my god, it just throws that like
Yeah.
out the window.
Oh
It really. I saw a tweet yesterday that said something like, "Oh, I love having mums who are toddlers like me because you send a message like, oh, I'm going to be half hour late because of whatever reason." And they went, "Oh yeah, me too, me too, me too." So, but yeah.
yeah. Oh, it's good that we can share that comment. Yeah, I mean, like I said,
I tell
it's kind of dull, but
I tell you what's funny is you said that about TikTok. I've heard several stories from people recently where they put a TikTok up that's not been like really thought out or produced. It's been just a kind of a real life thing, and said very
Mm.
similar results where it's like gone pretty viral.
Yeah, I think there's something about that, and I think like we can tell whether it's in the moment or whether it's been like the fifth take, right?
Yeah,
You know, I do think we can. I don't know what it is, but we can tell. Yeah.
yeah.
It's-
Let's talk about your book, because I
sure.
don't want to not mention your book and then sort of get to the end of our hour and then be like, oh, we talked about it. So as I mentioned to you before we came on, a mutual friend told me about your book, and I was like, oh great, let's chat about it.
Cool.
So I guess firstly, what is it? Secondly, why? Thirdly, how do you go from that idea to going, right, I'm gonna have a book?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's called the 2 Hour Workshop Blueprint. I've got a copy right here.
Nice. And
Actually,
is it available to buy?
as of last week. So it's been it launched last week accidentally on Amazon. It was meant to go out Thursday, it went out Wednesday. But to
Okay.
get into gear and like get the algorithm moving with sales, it hit number one across various charts in the US and Australia.
I did it. Okay, I'm gonna buy it. Where? Let's have
Oh,
a look.
thank you.
Two.
2 Hour Workshop Blueprint. So it's all about I pretty much you got to write. I have to write for myself to keep
Okay.
motivated. Um, something I was doing when I was running workshops was I was spending way too much planning them, like over planning and overthinking things.
Right.
But last year I had to do like run a lot of different training sessions and workshops. So I had to figure out a framework to get that done quickly. So that's why I wrote the book, is
Okay.
like just sharing that. Plus, back to what I said earlier, like I was a first time facilitator. There were no just pick up resources where you could be like follow a formula and you could had a workshop. I was just
Yeah.
creating from scratch. So it's really just a practical guide. The reason I created it was actually I was inspired by a book called The 2 Hour Cocktail Party by Nick Gray. I don't know if
Okay.
you've heard of that book.
No.
Oh, it's brilliant. So he just talks about it's all about how adults can make friends and bring people together. And
Yeah.
I just found him on Twitter. I've got him. I had him on my podcast. So I ran a 2 hour cocktail party, but I think that was great. But the most exciting thing about that process was his book was so amazing. Like it was a joyful book. It was light. It was funny. It had illustrations. It had checklists. It had questions.
Yeah.
And I think before reading that book, I thought a book had to be like heavy nonfiction, and that idea kind of it didn't excite me. I saw this book and I was like,
No.
I could write a book like this for workshops. So anyway, I made sure I contacted Nick Gray and just gave him the heads up that I was doing it. But that's why I wrote it. And it's like I guess it was released last week. I'm super surprised by how much it's resonating with people that aren't in my audience. So
Yeah.
every day, these people I don't even know are buying it, emailing me. Uh,
Oh,
it's pretty
that
amazing.
must be cool.
Yes, it's like I just know like the front cover and the tagline. I think has just it's so dialed in.
It's a very good looking book. Like I could see myself if I was walking through the bookshop and I saw it, it would catch my eye, definitely.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, the process of this, right? So I've wanted to be an author for forever, but like I said, I just
Okay.
thought I don't want to write a boring nonfiction book. I was speaking at a conference in February, on the 23rd of February in California, and I thought
Okay.
I'm not going over there without a book. So, 1st of January, I started writing, and in 52 days, I had version one. There was a company in California, they're called 48 Hour Books. I sent the manuscript over to them, got on the plane, got into Northern California, and the books were in the lobby. And
No way.
yeah, that's how fine I cut it. They don't think so. I wanted to validate it, right? So, at this conference of talent development professionals, the book went,
How
everyone was
how
grabbing
many?
it.
How many books?
I had 80 copies printed. And I only put I put like 20 out at a time and they were just taken. So I put
Yeah.
another 20 out. And then I had this lady, she ran up to me and she's like, oh my gosh, I've got to run a 2 hour workshop in 2 weeks. I'm like, perfect, perfect. This is it. and so, and people freaking loved it. And so anyway, it was all about co-creation. So I had 25 beta readers, went through version one, provided feedback the whole way through. And I was looking for patterns on, when they drop off,
Yeah.
what phrases they liked, what phrases they hated. And then it took me about 3 or 4 months to get it formatted properly for launch last week.
Is
Yeah.
it self-published?
Yes. That's how I had the speed. You don't have that speed in the publishing world.
I mean, tell me if you don't want to talk about this stuff, but I'm kind of curious about how, like, the finances behind that.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to share finances.
because I guess a lot of people are probably in the same boat and would love to write a book.
Mm.
And again, I'm making a massive assumption, but I assume a lot of people will be like, oh, unless I've got a book agent or
No,
an editor, like trying to get down that traditional way of doing it is very challenging. And I've
yeah.
heard of self-publishing. I know it's a thing, but in my mind, I like so obviously the then you got the money aspect of it, which probably becomes an issue for people.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I paid probably the Toyota Corolla version of, like, in terms of the money I invested. Like, you could do it,
Okay,
honestly, you could do it with a $200 car. The way that,
because you've got paperbacks as well, right? So a lot of people you can do like Kindle versions of stuff
yeah,
incredibly easy.
but Amazon, so, okay, my book went live on Wednesday last week.
Yeah.
Someone had it in London on Friday. Someone in Italy had it on Friday. It's print on demand.
Oh, is it?
Yes. So I actually paid 200. So I paid $2,000 because I've got 200 copies I wanted to give away locally. But
Yeah.
it's all around the world, and people just it's getting printed by Amazon. The quality is pretty great. Like, this is Amazon. I bought one from Amazon to check. So
Oh, so if I
you
click
could
this button
literally,
now,
yes, that is going to be,
It will go to the warehouse and it will get printed off. That's incredible. I didn't know you could do that.
so there's no upfront, really. So if you want to do it cheaply, but I invested. So obviously, like, you talk about the cover art, I paid an illustrator a few grand, right, for
Right.
illustrations and covers. But she's good. She's a friend of mine. She's local. Like, I didn't go offshore. Editor is in Europe. He's in Spain. I think he was like 35 euros per 1,000 words.
Okay.
Um,
So it's currently showing as 15.99 on my Amazon that I'm looking at right now.
Euro,
Pounds.
pounds. Okay, yeah.
So how much will you see of that
Uh,
versus what Amazon see of that?
yeah. So they deduct the print cost, which I think is about £4 or £5, and then I get 60% of the royalties.
Oh, wowzers. Okay.
So honestly, like, you could write a book in 20 days, PDF, get it formatted. I had a formatter in Turkey, and then I had to get it reformatted by someone in Pakistan just through Fiverr. I can recommend. I mean, I'm going to do a whole thing about this. I'm running a webinar
You should do like
on
like
how
a
to write a
blog
book in
post or
52 days.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I'm running a webinar on it, and I've kept all my stats and things like that. So it really isn't. This is what I mean. Like, I paid like a okay price. You could go even more,
Yeah.
but I
But
invested
literally
in,
you have to send Amazon the PDF and then they do the rest.
yes, that is
Wow, I
it.
never knew that.
And what I didn't know, this annoyed me, because I actually paid a local printer because I thought Amazon author copies would take like 2 weeks to get to me, and I wanted to get the book out quickly to friends
Yeah.
and influencers. But but I ordered the book, and like in 2 days it was here. I'm like, damn it. So you can order author copies that are at cost price. You just pay for shipping.
That is mad.
So I would have, if I'd known what I know now.
I'm tempted to buy it. Oh, I will buy it, but I just want to buy it now just to see, knowing that it's just coming from.
Well, on the back it says printed in whatever by Amazon, so you'll see it.
Oh, wowzers. Okay, I will
It's
buy that. And
incredible, hey.
that is
Like,
really
I
that
know,
removes the barrier to entry to writing a book,
massively,
because
massively.
I always thought about it, and I mean I don't know what I would write, but I always thought, oh, do I want to write one of these ones? It's just a PDF that goes onto a Kindle, and it's like it's not a real book, right? I'm
Yeah,
not going to have that on my bookshelf that when people come around, I go, oh, I wrote that.
now you can.
And I always thought, oh, the it'd be too prohibitive cost wise to do it any other way. But hmm,
And so I noticed, actually, so I messaged Yuri because Yuri sent me an endorsement, and it's on my website, but I didn't have time to get it in the book. But
okay.
now I can. So I'm just going to get the formatter to add it because there's one
Oh,
typo
so
in
you can
it.
just so you can
And I'll just
update it.
re-upload it.
Oh wow.
So if you buy the version today, you'll get different to maybe next week's version.
Oh well, tell me when you got Yuri's endorsement in it, and then I'll buy it.
Okay.
Unless you're not going to put it in.
No, I will. It's just like that was like low priority, but I'll move it up the priority list.
No. Don't prioritize. Just as and when you get it done, just drop me a message and
Will
I'll buy
do.
it.
Will do.
Okay, that's really interesting because I think like my goal from this podcast is I want people to take away information and learn things and be inspired and whatever. And like I said earlier, right, if no one listens to it, fine. I just learned something massively. But I think people will take. I think that's really important for people to know that.
I think so. And do you know, and you're right, because not many people know it. So what I'm finding the most interesting thing is like everyone's like, oh, you know, you need to, if you need to be taken seriously, you have to have a book. I'm like, I've got a podcast, I do everything, I do emails. Like, why do I need a book? Like, I was kind of, I didn't
Yeah.
understand. Anyway, in the last couple of weeks, even when I was in California, the second you have a book, you have no idea the status, the status.
Is that right?
Oh, I was at a Chamber of Commerce event last night, and you know, and then I gave everyone a copy of my book, and everyone was like
Well, I
flooding
guess you get
over
introduced. I get you. You go from being introduced as facilitator
to
Leanne Hughes to
author.
author Leanne Hughes.
I had a guy in Hong Kong. I just had like, so the book's out for a week. This head of some construction company in Hong Kong is like, we got on a call. I have no idea why we're on this call, and he's like, can you tell me more about this 2-hour workshop? Like, does it take 2 hours to teach us how to run a 2-hour workshop? And so I've got this, like, I feel like we're going to be working together, maybe doing other work,
Right.
not just workshops, but it's bizarre.
Funny, isn't it?
It's so bizarre. Like the status symbol, it's like,
Have
yeah.
you done anything yet commercially where you've seen a bump in your rates or conversions or something as a result of being an author as a not an
Well,
author?
it's only been a week, but I did pre-sell. So in February, I had a client. They asked just a quote on some speaking, and I was like, I was a bit cheeky, and option 3, my proposal was plus you get 50 books.
Right.
And they took option 3, and I'm like, crap, I better have this book ready. Anyway, I put the 50 aside now. So I mean, that bumped it up, but it also anchors, right? Anchors in the amount. I mean, this is it, right? Social media, like I'm getting like a ton of followers, a ton of people emailing. I feel like there's opportunity now maybe to create a program off the back of it, like a virtual program. But I'm just being aware of what's going on, not rushing into anything yet.
Have you got any more plans for another book?
Yeah, I would love to write another book. I mean, I just told you how easy it is.
Yeah.
Like, but I'm even thinking like a narrower book on a particular industry, like in construction and mining, they've got something called a pre-start meeting at the beginning of a shift.
Okay.
And I've done training on that before. I could write a book on that and get it out in 30 days. But I think I've really got to focus on just marketing this and playing the long game. But I think in the back of my mind, I definitely want to write more. I mean, I'm just curious with AI and the disruption of will books even be relevant in 3 or 4 years? Like, I think now's the time to run hard with books because I think they might be obsolete or everyone will be doing it very soon.
Yeah.
Like podcasting, like starting a podcast.
Yeah. Once it's just barrier to entry, isn't it? Right. As soon as that barrier to entry comes down, then the floodgates open and people pour in. What? So there's no upfront cost with Amazon?
None.
Wow.
If you have a PDF loader, if you can go into Canva, I mean, it's just $5. I would pay someone to format, but you can just do it in Word and upload as a PDF and follow the rules. Like,
this is that. There's actually, I think it might be Yuri sent it to me a little while ago. There's how I created a Amazon bestseller
with the blank book, yeah.
Yeah.
That's that's a whole other strategy, right? So I was very clever, not clever, but I'd had a friend in America and he invited me to be on his community call. I said, "Oh, can we do it during launch week?" So I was on this call with people that like they're absolutely the market for this book. After that webinar, I checked Amazon, and all you have to do is get spikes, right? And they update every 30 minutes. So I hit bestseller like second day of the book release.
Screen grab that
screen
one.
Grabbed it, screen grabbed it. Screen grab it
and
and
put
shout
it on
about
LinkedIn.
it. Screen and shout. Yeah.
They're not stupid, Amazon, are they? They know how to sort of get people to generate a bit of a buzz.
Yeah, and I'm only selling it on Amazon right now. And then I'll open once I got reviews, then I'll open up other platforms to sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, do you know what? You've just proved to me in that last 10 minutes why I love podcasting, because the information you share there, you wouldn't have got as a casual meeting at a networking event or wherever. So
that's right.
Okay. I'm going to shift gears now a bit because I'm conscious of time. What's the best way to stand out from the crowd when creating? And that can be either a podcast or a book, I guess.
Go against the grain and say, defend an alternative view.
Okay. Is that as depressing as an answer as finding a niche in a podcast.
No, I think it's like I talked about before, Alan Weiss, when he was on my podcast and he was saying all these things that were just counterintuitive and I never even thought about before. So he actually said, don't niche down, be a generalist.
Yeah.
Like, and he can defend any point. And I think if you're talking about standing out, is actually to stand out, you have to say something different and
Yeah.
and defend it, and make sure that you can own that. But if you're saying everything else and being vanilla, that you won't stand out.
No. Okay. Do you know? Yeah, I do like that. It's one of those things I need to do that more. I don't. I'm a little bit. I actually did a LinkedIn post about it. Funny enough, not long ago. It's kind of one of my best posts because it was saying exactly that. It's kind of tough to do sometimes.
It's really hard to do. I mean, I worked for, I won't go into this, but one of my jobs when I was 25 was working for the most like controversial company in Australia. We had lawsuits every week. It was a camp event company. We put crazy slogans that were really pissing people off in the back of vans.
Right.
But we spent no money in marketing. Our website crashed because we had just word of mouth. We were on the news. It
Well,
worked.
fun. Do you know we talked about Joe Rogan, and I said to you about I listened to the Ice Cube episode yesterday, and he was talking about when NWA. I don't know if you're an Ice Cube fan or an NWA fan, but so when he said when NWA started, they had some pretty controversial tracks. One about the police, which is quite famous, obviously. And he said that there was several things happened. Like the FBI wrote them a letter saying like we don't like this, condoning uh, violence against the servicemen and police and the rest of it. And they obviously it got published in the newspaper. And he said this thing just skyrocketed us. Like everyone was like, and then the other one that was really funny was there was this. I think it was one of the a politician or former first lady was really upset about all the swearing in their rap songs. And the very short version is they then, the parental advisory explicit lyrics stickers you get on CDs and vinyl back then. They were the first ever band. That was their compromise. Like they were trying to get their music taken off the thing. And they said that what happened was they then put these stickers on. That was the compromise. You have to put these stickers on so parents know. And he said as soon as they did that, sales skyrocketed.
Like a beacon. It's like, I want to buy that.
He said it had exactly the opposite impact that they wanted because everyone's like, oh, if it hasn't got swear words in it, I'm not listening to it.
Yeah.
And he said he got to the point where there was other bands who had no cuss words in their music were putting it on just to try and get sales. I don't know.
I want to listen to it now. I want to listen to it.
You should do it. It's a good episode.
I will.
Because I didn't really. It was one of those ones where I thought, oh, it might be interesting. But yeah, I'm really glad I listened.
Amazing. I will.
Tell me something you struggle with or find tough.
Focusing.
Do you?
Yeah, big time. I mean, like with a book, there's a direct outcome.
I was just going to say, I find that hard to believe for someone who's written a book in
books and podcasting.
Days.
There's a direct outcome, but with other things like just general work, it's like, what do I do with my life? Honestly, every day I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Who do I want to be? I'm constantly asking myself philosophical questions. So I actually like having projects like books or podcasts because I can like at least direct my energy in a certain way. But so yeah, big time.
Okay, how do you combat it?
by doing projects that that are going to test me, like writing a book in 50 in 6 months, and just being okay.
Is that having a goal being goal oriented?
Yeah, but I also think being okay, because I heard a really great definition about clarity, because I think where I get stuck is I think, oh, what's the 5-year thing? But it's actually, no, what's the next project? And so I've kind of just simplified it for myself, and that's how I navigate it.
Okay. Okay. If you could shadow one, I was going to say podcaster, but I will throw author into the mix as well. If you could shadow one podcaster or author for the day, who would it be and why?
I think Tim Ferriss.
Would you?
Yeah. I know it's kind of token, but...
Well, I feel like Tim Ferriss is in the Pat Flynn category, isn't he? He's been... I'm pretty sure, and I'd have to Google it, but I'm pretty sure they've been putting out content around the same amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I find him really thoughtful. I really like his questions. So I'd actually just love to be just around him and hearing what he talks about. Plus, he does he's like a human guinea pig. So he'd be doing something crazy, whether
Yeah.
it's, yeah. So I think that'd be fun.
I talked about this in the previous episode. Did you ever listen to his episode where he talked about the lessons he'd learned from doing his podcast?
No. I'm going to write that down as a.
I'll share that with you. There's two actually. He did one recently with Colin and Samir where he talked about it, and then he did one on his own podcast with a guy whose name is Chris Hutchins, INS, and it's something like lessons learned from 700 million downloads or something like that.
Cool. Thank you.
But he goes really into nitty gritty about everything he does. It's good. If you're into podcasting or you're thinking about starting one, it's a really good listen.
Sweet.
Okay, Tim Ferriss, good answer. If someone came up to you, and again, I'll throw this podcast or writing or both. If someone came up to you and said, Leanne, I really want to write a book or I want to start a podcast, what would you tell them?
Let's do it. Let's get it done now. We can get it done in 90 minutes. Let's map it out and go.
Do you know, it's funny. I asked that question and I invariably get a very similar answer. And I don't know if that's because the people, like some sort of confirmation bias of the people are getting on this podcast.
I think I think people just overthink and it's like, nothing matters. Let's just do you want to do it? Let's get it done. And it's not that hard. Like once I've done it now and it's easy for me to re-engineer it for someone else. So
how long had you been thinking about writing a book before you wrote a
forever,
book?
like 4 or 5 years. I was so angry. Honestly, that's why I did it on the 1st of January, because on the 31st of December, I was reflecting on the year and going, I'm so pissed off I'm not an author yet. I'm so angry. And that's what propelled me to do it. It was the pain.
Oh, really?
It was the pain of that. Yeah. I was so, yeah, honestly, I was fueled by that, by rage.
So what would you have said if I'd have asked you that question in December last year?
What would I have said to that person if they...
Yeah. I suspect you might have said the same thing, which is kind of why I'm asking.
Yeah, I think we probably would have just shaken each other and gone, let's just do this together and figure it out together. Let's do this now. It would be, yeah.
Okay. Final question for you. If we speak again in 12 months' time and you say, Chris, do you know what, it's been a really successful year for me, what would have happened?
I would say it would be related to the book. The book took me somewhere really exciting.
Yeah.
That could be metaphorically, it could be literally just took me to Fiji or something like that. Yeah, I think that would be it. Now that I've released it, it's I'm really curious around who's going to find it, where will it go. It'll carry its own sort of energy, and I'm curious to where that leads.
So that could be what, people coming to getting you to come and talk about workshops, or it could be running workshops, or
that's right. Yeah, speaking.
Okay. Any thoughts about doing a TED talk on the topic?
I think my TED talk would be based around something else, and I kind of resist TED. Maybe it just seems like everyone's doing a TED talk, so
TED Talk's the new podcast, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, it might be nice, but that's not a pressing thing.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I will link to everything in the show notes, the book, the podcast. I'll have to listen back everything else we've talked about. If people want to come and say hi to you in the meantime, where should I send them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, LinkedIn, please connect with me. Don't click the follow button, click the connect button. Okay. And I mean, I'm on, my website's leannehughes.com, book the 2-hour workshop blueprint, Instagram, Twitter at Leanne Hughes as well.
Okay. I will link to everything below. Leanne, thank you so much for joining me. What time is it in
7:30.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Not quite as late as I thought it was going to be. But thank you. Like I said, it is all I want from this podcast is for people to have things to take away, to learn, to be inspired by, and you've got my brain buzzing with ideas more than most. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, you're so welcome, and hit me up anytime if you've got questions about books, and I'll be metaphorically shaking you through the screen going, come on, let's get it done.
You might regret that, but yes. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.